First of all, thank you so much, Ana Maria, for agreeing to participate in this project, Oral Histories of Latinos in Ohio. Today is Monday, August 24th, 2020. Can we start with your full name, please?
My name is, first of all, thank you very much for doing this. This is really cool. My name is Ana Maria Perales Lang.
Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in El Paso, Texas, and that's where I grew up, in the border city, which borders with Juarez. So that's where,
What was it like growing up there? What was your childhood like?
Well, I have 8 brothers, 5 older brothers, 3 little brothers. I have 1 brother that passed away. So it was hectic. My parents moved to the Northeast in El Paso, which at the time was a kind of all Anglo area for the better schools. So pretty much it just very, very different than Ohio. Being a Texan, when you're a Texan, you tend to think that you're a Texan. So your nationality, your ancestry doesn't really matter. Texans are just Texans. So I never even realized I was even a different person until I came to Ohio. My whole life, my parents were very, very, very patriotic. I have brothers in the military and retired military. So my father always raised me to be American, Mexican second. So I never really grew up in a Mexican culture. I grew up more in American culture, thinking that I was American of Mexican descent. And so my father, we learned, like we celebrate the 4th of July. I didn't have a quinceañera. I had a sweet 16. I was never really learned about my culture. I didn't learn about my culture until I seeked it out as an adult. But growing up, I was always considered myself American and very patriotic, very involved in politics. It's one of my passions. And so I never really understood a lot of what now has come back to bite me in the butt because, growing up in the Northeast and growing up with different people, you just think everybody's going to treat you the same. And so it was a very big culture shock to move, going from a father who kept me, with 5 brothers and 3 little brothers. My father was, I love him to death. But he was very much macho in that, for example, I had was asked to go to a university somewhere else, and my father never considered it because, he had to stay home. My father did not even change my bedroom until I got married. Like my bedroom stayed exactly, the way it was. When I left home to move out and move in with a roommate, he didn't speak to my mother for a month because she encouraged me. So, and then I used to have to come every Sunday, and stay for hours.
To visit,
yes. So that it was really, but I was used to it. People think it's weird that I went from being from a very sheltered life to move into Ohio and never moving back from Texas. From when I left Texas, I never went back. I do go back to visit, but it's my mom and dad my mother was very much involved in the schools. My mother is a Spaniard of her origin, and she was raised in a boarding school. So my mother always believed in giving back, and pretty much that's kind of what I've learned from them. So back to here.
So tell me, you had 8 brothers, and so it was 8 of you kids.
9 of us. I have 8 brothers and myself, so it's 9.
You're
9
the
kids.
only girl.
Only girl.
Oh,
yeah.
Tell me, what was that like, being the only?
Well, when you watch it on TV and you think it's like the Osmonds, no. My brothers taught me how to swim by throwing me in the deep part and saying, "Swim around." Okay. Crying. What? You can't cry. Don't be crying, So you learn to be strong. It's really funny because I was never really close to my family, my brothers, when I was a kid. It's really funny because full circle, I'm very close to them now as an adult. But I think because my brothers were, first of all, they were all professionals and they all did well and they all have set a good example. I was always my dad's favorite, and my father would say it. It was not a secret. So, I was the only daughter. So he would always say, this isn't nice, but he would say, like, my daughter was his grandchild because it's the daughter of his daughter. So he would say, that's my granddaughter, But my dad he just, I remember being a kid and I would go and mess with my brothers with a stick and then run to my dad because I knew they couldn't touch me. So, those, but they also, it was different. I mean, for me, I was raised around boys, and it's really funny, I raised around boys, and I was raised around males, and I have a job now where males dominated, but God gave me a girly girl, so it was kind of got me back. So, but it's really funny, because growing up, I never liked dolls. I never like Barbies. I used to use them, grab them and throw them like they were swimming and just throw them with their hair. I would climb trees and climb fences and be kind of a tomboy, and never really, was all girly. But it came out later, you know what I mean, as I've grown up. And, so it's funny. I think back, and my brothers, for example, I remember going to a slumber party, which, was very unheard of, right? But my brothers would be there in the morning to pick me up so I can go to catechism. Like, that's how it was. We would go to church, and my one brother and we would pretend we went to church and go and get the bulletin. But then we'd get home, and my mother would be like, okay, what was the gospel about? And what's this? And so we would have to tell the truth. And then they'd send us right back. So, yeah, pretty strict, very strict home. But, my parents, very education oriented. So we really we were never told when you go to college, it was assumed. And it was, we were never told you need to help people. It was assumed. I remember helping my mom with her PTO when I was a little girl. I remember helping her through my whole life. She always was giving somebody, doing something for somebody. She had a group of friends that she had, considering my mother had no family there. But her friends, that's where I think I saw that friends were like special, because my mom's friends were very good friends, and they would come together for everything. And my mom was always volunteering at the church, she used to volunteer at the Methodist church, helping the Latin people fill out paperwork. And I'd be there with her. She would volunteer. She had a food pantry at the house. She was always doing something. So kind of second nature, even with my father. My dad, he was my idol, right? So he was treated badly. And so one of the things I remember is first of all, my father's name was Carlos, and they would call him Charlie because they would say Carlos, they say Charlie. So one of the things that I done as an adult is I was Anna for many years. I lived in Charlotte, and in where I live now, I became Ana Maria, who is who I really was. I just let it be Anna for many years. And when my father passed, it's like I switched gears. I have made it my mission to be the boss that my father should have had, to be the person that my dad would be proud of. And, well, my mother also, but my father, because I saw, my father was given away when he was a child. He was sold, and yet he turned out to be this amazing man who was just incredible. He raised all college-educated kids. He was successful, and and yet he was a very humble man, and he was a mechanic. And so at his funeral, it was like standing room only that's how much of a person he was. I remember being a kid and his boss treating him lousy, and my dad having to work 7 days a week or this or that, and my father being a citizen, you know what I mean? But I never really thought about it. My dad never complained, but I saw it. And I remember that, and he always encouraged me, like he's always, from the time I was born, like I was never princess, I was reina, I'm a queen. My dad always encouraged me to do well. And so with me, he would, I remember like we would have talks about politics. We totally disagreed on politics. And he always knew what was going on in the world. He always made sure that we knew what was going on and how it impacted us. And so his boss would do things, and I hated the guy. So when my father passed, I actually banned him from the funeral. So it was like, I thought, one day I'm going to be a boss, and I'm never going to be this way. No matter what, I will never treat my people, my employees, the way my father was treated. And I don't think my dad ever saw, because he would say, that's life. Life is hard.
Right.
He took whatever happened to him. He never complained about it. He didn't say, oh, this is the reason I didn't do this or whatever. He used it and went the opposite. He had a terrible childhood, so he became an amazing father. You know what I mean? Everything that happened to him, he flipped it and made it into a reason to be better. You know what I mean? Like he said, I remember saying, I don't think it's right that good people get bad things happen to them. My dad said, you don't get a pass because you're a good person. You're supposed to be a good person. Nobody's going to throw you a party. So with my employees, even when they do their job, like, oh, I did my job. Well, that's what you get a paycheck for. When you go above and beyond, that's impressive. Right. But to do your job, to get good grades, we were always told that. Your only job is to get good grades. Right. You don't pay rent. You don't do anything else. Get good grades. So it's kind of
What do you remember? Obviously, both your parents were an influence, a strong influence in your life.
She is my mother too. Yes.
Right,
a different type, but yes.
It seems like your father sounds
my idol,
very very important.
Yeah.
Tell me, what do you remember doing with him as a young girl?
Well, like I said, I remember we would go on Sundays to get menudo, which is my favorite. I could eat that every day. Go, and then we would. Like I said, we'd talk about politics, about things. I remember one memory I have of him. We got to meet George Sr., the first George Bush, and he wasn't a big fan. And I said, "But you don't even like the guy." And he said, "But he's still the president." He was like, But it was really funny. My dad his way of being. We'd go get Church's chicken, which my brothers always make fun of that because that's like my chicken. So when I go back to Texas, my husband will tell you we would get Church's chicken. Yeah. But my dad he was always working. What I remember, it's kind of hard because we didn't really do things separate because when you have a lot of children, one thing is my parents we never raised each other, which I think is kind of now as I've met a lot of immigrant people and I've met a lot of Latinos, Mexican Americans, they help each other. My mother raised us, each and every one of us. My father raised us. We didn't raise each other, and I think that it's had an influence on me because it had made me more independent. So kind of like, for example, we come together when something bad happens, but we come together expecting everybody to have a job to do. Not, you know what I mean? Not really looking out in that respect. I think because, one, my father didn't have upbringing. He didn't have people he was on his own since he was 4. So he raised himself. And my mother was raised in a boarding school by nuns. So you don't really get that kind of connection. So putting them two together, two totally separate people in their own, totally different. And they're putting them together. They raised their children like my mother was a stay-home mom. My father I remember him coming home and we would fight over who got to take his shoes off. He would lay, my dad had this big belly. He would lay on front of the big fan AC that we had, and my brothers would play marbles on him because my dad had this huge belly button. So it's crazy things like that. But as far as my dad, when I spent more time with him one-on-one as an adult because for my dad, to be honest, it was like forced because my mom would say, your padre, llámale tu padre, So I'd call him and I would be like, how's it going? But then I started to enjoy it. And I'm glad that I understood later how important, because then when I would go, we would go get pan dulce, we would go and I would tell him about this or that. We would go to the flea market and I always got something. We go to the store when I was a kid. I remember that. I remember going when was my turn to go. When you have a lot of kids, going to the grocery store is like a big deal because my dad would get paid, and which means we would get a treat, and I would always get a book. So, and it's funny because one of my older brothers said he remembers I would have my Michael Jackson posters and my Donny Osmond posters, and I would get the Tiger Beat magazine, and my dad would let me I got to get 2 magazines, and I would get a book, and he would. you know, and they would always say, well, how come she always gets 3 things and you only get 1, you know, so yeah, so those are the, you know, I remember spending a lot of time with him. I think that I have a strong sense of self and worth because of my dad. However, my mom kind of was the person that's kind of, if for my brothers, my mother was everything. For me, she was public enemy number 1. Growing up, you know, and I know now it's because she was trying to keep me focused. I realized, but as a kid, I thought she didn't like me. So I thought, you know, how come I'm always in trouble? You know, because she was very, very strict with me in regards to how she wanted me to do things and do whatever. But I realized it's because, 1, she was not used to being with girls. She had all boys. And then 2nd, I think she never wanted me to be a housewife. Never. And my only bad thing is that I wish my parents were alive to see my success. I think they would have been okay with it. But more importantly, that my daughter is an amazing person, you know, and my grandchildren. But my mom was the person that my brothers, to be a mom, you think of my mom, she was only like 4'9", and I didn't even know her name. Everybody called my mom Señora or, you know, Mrs. Perales, because nobody had like the right to call her by her first name. My dad called her Ma. We called her Ma. So I didn't even know her name until, you know, it's like, how is that possible? Because nobody ever spoke to her by her first name out of respect. So for her, I remember her being a kid, and my younger brother, I have a brother who has mental handicap, and he was being taken advantage of. And my mom went down there, and these were these big bullies. And here's my mom, and she's over there like, she went over there and put the fear of God into him, you know, and that's who she was. My brother did school. She took him to school. My mom took him to school like by the hand as a high schooler to teach him I mean, that's who she was. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't play with her. My brother came home drunk one time. She went outside with the hosed him down. So for me, I was like, okay, I'll behave. But so I was seeing her as like,
very strong,
very strict, and very like, she didn't like me because she was always after me about something. She always encouraged me to read, to do this, to do that. So it would be, you know, and she had this saying, "Tú que sabes tanto y entiendes menos." You know, you who know more but understand less. So, you know, it's like she would say, you know, you think you know everything, you don't know anything. So, so yeah, so kind of.
Right. So, Ana Maria, did you grow up speaking Spanish?
I spoke Spanish, choppy Spanish. We would speak, like I said, which I always do to people that learn Spanish in the first language. They're speaking Spanish to me, and I was responding in English. My mom was never allowed us to use Spanglish. She thought it was a disrespect to the language. And so we could either one language or the other. None of this mixing of the languages. So pretty
Both
much
of your
English.
parents spoke Spanish?
Yes. But like I said, my mom was raised in a certain way that she's a thank you card person, you know, one kind of person. And so breaking the language for her, like when people would say, speak part Spanish, she would get really upset. We weren't allowed to do that. So it was either English or Spanish. So mainly English. I did translate for people, for her friends and whatever all the time as little kids. So for me to see that now with Nepalian people and Somalian people, it's like, I remember that. You know what I mean? It's like, that's what kids do. You translate because you speak the language faster than they do. So yeah, English has always been my predominant. My friends I belong to have a set of friends that I met here, used to be called the Damas Latinas, and they actually always encourage my Spanish. I'm embarrassed by it because it's really bad, and when I'm really trying to get my point across, I get a translator because I want to make sure, you know what I mean. So, but yeah, my Spanish is choppy.
Tell me
it's more of a Texican Spanish.
Tell me about good or bad experiences that you've had with speaking Spanish in public.
I have never had a bad experience, but I'm not a shy person. I live in Morrow County. I am the only person of color. I've lived there for over 25 years. I was the PTO president. I was vice president of the Ball Association. So, and you see me, I'm not a light person. I'm a brown person. They did think I was black there when I first started, lived there, because they'd never seen anybody brown. But I've never stopped speaking Spanish. Like, for example, I've made a couple of big mistakes through my life. And one of them, first of all, I've never spoken Spanish where someone has said to me they're offended by the language. I would not take it well, and I would say something, okay? So I've always been I think my personality shows that I'm not someone who's gonna, if someone's rude, I say something. So I'm much less someone who's saying something derogatory. But or to somebody else, I would just jump in. But one thing that I did do wrong, and I regret it, is that when I had my daughter, I did not teach her Spanish. And my reasoning was the most ridiculous reasoning, which is I live in a place where nobody speaks Spanish but me. So I thought, well, I'm the only one, so why would I teach her Spanish? So, which I wish, but I did a disservice to her to do that. So I'm not doing that with my grandchildren. And my son-in-law was a manager here, and he's learned a lot of Spanish. And with my daughter, it's hard. I've seen her treated lousy because she didn't speak Spanish. When she was in LMA, she had a couple of experiences where she was kind of treated. This is way years ago. They do an amazing job now, so totally different, whatever. But she was treated different because she didn't speak. Yeah, because they told her she wasn't Mexican enough. And I had always raised her to be Mexican, even though her last name was not. She had Boston. She's light skinned, and she could easily be. She's biracial, But I've always taught her that she was Latin from the time she came into the world. So she always knew that, and always very proud of that. So it was a very bad situation to be the only time she's been treated with was discrimination with people of her own. That was kind of a hard one. It was difficult for me to understand that one. So overall, not really. I see, my friends and I have been places. We do go to a lot of places, and everybody's speaking Spanish. People will look at you, but nobody's been brave enough to say anything. But I have seen people say things to other people that speak other languages, and I have said something, and I think that's really wrong.
When you grew up in Texas, was there any rules against speaking Spanish?
There wasn't.
The language. That
came a little bit. I was born in the 60s, so that came a little bit after, prior to my growing up. However, my oldest brother, he went to Austin College, and he belonged to a Latino fraternity, and he probably had experienced more discrimination than none of us, you know what I mean? Because by the time they got to me, pretty much the city's pretty blended in and whatever, so you didn't see it as much. However, my father remembers, he told me of many incidents. There used to be signs that would say no Mexicans or dogs. Like I said, even his name, they changed his name, and people, that was kind of a big deal. One thing that's kind of unusual, and people don't understand, if you grow up in a border city, you're not as likely to be as sympathetic with people that cross illegally as you would be when you're from somewhere else. Like, what I've noticed is being from a border city, you're more or less tolerant to that because it affects you more. So growing up, I always saw it like they're breaking the law. It's wrong. Never really seeing the bigger picture of it. And I think it's really interesting how, when I speak to other people from Texas or New Mexico, and feel pretty much, and Latinos, they always feel pretty conservative views about immigration. And then you're moving up here and more liberal, So there's that thing where people think that you're going to be a certain way, and you tend to be more conservative. People thinking that you should know both languages. I know that El Paso has parts of it where you could go through your whole life and never learn English, But my father was never from that school of thought. He always thought everybody assimilates and whatever. And where my brother would argue and say, well, actually, we were here first, you know, and we assimilate when Texas is part of Mexico, you know, and he would get arguments with my brother about that. But he did he did feel discrimination. I remember a couple of incidents where people assumed that I would be speaking Spanish first, and that I don't take too lightly. But I experienced more discrimination in Ohio than I ever did in my whole life. So
tell me, when did you first come to Ohio? What year?
Let's see. Kelly is 19. Let's see. She's 91, 2000, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96.
96. What brought you to Ohio?
My ex-husband was in the military. He's in the Army. Fort Bliss is part of El Paso. It's like in the middle. And he had family from Ohio. He wanted Kelly to be raised in the same way he was raised. He came from a little farm town. He wanted his cousins, his family. He wanted all that. So we used to live in Charlotte, and then when she was 5, almost turning 5. He wanted her in the schools where she would be with her family and everybody, all his cousins and everybody. So we moved here, and that's where we moved to. You know, we live in the town that's next to the town where he grew up, and all his people are, and total different. And I mean, we're talking farm, very small town. We don't even have a police department. We don't have, we live in a very small town. So
tell me about those first years of coming to Ohio, of adjusting. What was your impression?
You know, to be truthfully honest, when I first came to Ohio, I mean, I've been to Ohio before. We used to come and see his family. But, you know, when you come for 5 minutes, you know, it's not the same. You know, he's fantastic people. They were always really great. To this day, I get along really great with his family. And I was treated really well, so I don't remember that. And then when I first got here, when I first came to Ohio, I was a wife. And I remember enrolling my daughter, and I met one of the people from the office, and her daughter was the same age as my daughter, and she invited us to be in her t-ball team. And since she introduced me to people, and that part, to be honest, I was always treated really well. I never had any issues. It wasn't until I started working when I got divorced, and it's really funny because I was in Ohio over years before it actually. I remember one incident where we did a kids' night at PTO, and I was the president, and I remember looking out, and I was like, you know, I'm the president, so I'm the host, and everybody in the room, and of course we were doing Greece, so it was sold out, and I was the only non-white person in there, and I remember looking and thinking, wow, for a second it was like, whoa, but I was elected, and I had no issues, and they were really good. I liked it. I started working in Columbus, and that's where the reality of being, first of all, I didn't even know I was an immigrant, because I'm not. You know, I didn't even know that I was, when people would say, where are you from? And I would say, Texas. No, where are you really from? Texas. No, where are you really from? Where's your mother from? Scott Bluff, Nebraska. You know, where's your grandfather from? Kansas. You know, 6 generations back. So, you know, it was very, I was working as a property manager on the west side of Columbus. And I thought, well, I'm going to work because they needed someone bilingual. So I'm thinking I'm bilingual, I thought. And I got this. And the utmost discrimination was just incredibly in your face that I had never experienced in my entire life. And it was very eye-opening. I remember officer coming to the office and assuming that I was the hired help when I was the boss. Many instances of that. And then that's why I got real involved with that. Because I remember we were calling the police when something bad happened to a person, and that police not taking it serious or not wanting to do a report. Me and Internal Affairs or like that. I remember Chief Jackson was the chief then, and he really, I got to give it to him. I remember that he did pay attention when I called, and actually, you know, it was years of fighting it. And then when my boss decided, hey, I want to buy a property on the north side, and at the time there was no Latinos, and he said, we want to market to the Latino community, and we're going to name it. So I named it La Vista, and we targeted, but the discrimination then here, Westerville, my employees getting pulled over for no reason. It was, very eye-opening. Ohio, for the first time, it's funny, I went to a town where I'm the only person of color and never experienced discrimination. Come to Columbus, where it's diverse, and oh my goodness, very different.
You felt different, yeah.
Yes.
You were seen as a
very different. Assumed that I was a migrant worker, and assumed that English was my second language, assumed that I had no education, it was just crazy. It just very different, yes. So that's why I go home to my quiet little town still.
What town?
I live in Marengo.
Marengo, okay. So you've been in this kind of business all year?
For 30 years.
30 years, okay.
5 years in Charlotte, 25 here.
Tell me about working here. So it sounds like in the places that you worked as a property manager or apartment type of housing, you've worked with maybe underserved populations, right? And so
I'm a turnaround manager.
Right. So tell me about that work and the mission of
the mission. Okay, so I'm a turnaround manager, and what that basically means is that I go to a property. I work for private owners, and I make it into a nice property. So going from a very bad property to a good property. So it kind of happened by accident. I lived in Charlotte. Was living there when my daughter was a baby. She was maybe like a week old, and I'd gone to the office to pay the rent, and they said to me, "Hey, you have a degree, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "We need someone for the office, and would you like to work here?" And I'm like, "I've never done this kind of work, and I just had a baby." And the guy, the owner, the boss, he came out and he said, "You could use my office, and you could bring your baby to work." So I was like, "Really?" And he said, "Yes." And the rest is history. I did. My daughter was raised in the office. Even though I majored in political science, so it had nothing to do with what I did. I had no experience whatsoever. I had only been there less than maybe 7 months, coming from, never been outside of Texas, going to North Carolina, never been around a lot of people, African American people. This is a predominantly African American property. He took a chance on me. I mean, at the time he was a very nice man, and then later, as I remember negotiating with him about, I didn't want to be the office manager. I wanted to be the property manager because that's the person with all the power. And him sending me back to school to get my certifications for property management and all that. And what I realized was that if you can make money, meaning collect the rents, which is what pays the bills, you could do a lot of good. They will allow you to do good if you can make money. So the big thing to learn was market the property and learn how to market it, and at the same time be able to bring in people to come and do things for the residents. And I learned that a lot really quick. And I really enjoyed it. And what I really liked was that I got to make a difference. And then just kind of going from there to Marengo, I'd stopped working, stay-home mom. And then when I got divorced, I went back into the business with Schottenstein, different companies. And same thing, as long as if you did your job well and you rented and you filled it and you collected it, which is the big one, they left you alone and they let you do what you want. And I was kind of like in that when I met the person I work for now, who gave me an opportunity. At the time, when I first met him, I didn't like him. He didn't like me. But what I realized that you could do a lot of good and give back and be able to do for the residents and bring in all kinds of programs and do a lot. And being on the West Side, I was able to help the Latino people. And that was like my mission. Originally was my mission, switched. But it started like I'm here on the West Side, and this man, and I just started working for him, but I saw that there was this need for people to just be an advocate. So I thought, okay, if I can be good at this, then I can be an advocate. So I started to do that, and I started to, just by little things, simple things like, for example, you come in to pay the rent and you say to me, the lady at the CVS was rude to me because I was, didn't speak English. I'll be calling CVS, how dare you? There's laws. People come in, bring in forms. I'll help them fill them out. So things simple like that, and then trying to take it to the next level, and then eventually, being when I working for this owner, he also likes building communities, and that's basically what I went from. So I thought, okay, I'm a turnaround manager. I go places and I make them good. But what I really am doing is I'm trying to create communities. It takes a village, so I create villages. That's what in my head, so when he bought this property when he took this property originally, I was going to not only stay for a little bit and go back to the other company, but I stayed for the closing and all that. But him and I just kind of gelled, and we did. This property is doing well. So he then came to me and said, "Hey, you want to do what I'd like to do is I will fund it, and then you run it, and we buy a property." And so it was like, I can do all this different. By then, my mission has changed a little bit. It was more empowering women and girls, women of color, because I saw so many cases of domestic violence.
Right.
That's kind of what happened. What people don't realize is property management. You are basically, it's a city, okay? Where you live, if you live in apartments or you are living in a city, everything that happens there happens to people in the regular. They are giving their biggest part of their paycheck to that place. Most people's biggest part is their mortgage or their rent, right? A lot, even higher than a car, for most people. So they're giving you the biggest responsibility, because in return you take care of them. The COVID couldn't shut us down because we still had to take care of everybody. We had a flood the week of the COVID, a flood that affected 72 units. So we couldn't say, oh, I can't take care of it. We had to, fires, domestic violence, people losing people. So what you do is you create a village. You basically what you're doing is saying, okay, I may not have a fancy pool, but my Mariana will sit next to you when your husband died at the hospital, which is what she's done. We had a resident who didn't speak the language, didn't speak Spanish either. She was from somewhere else, but she lost her husband. Well, Mariana lost her husband, so she could relate. So she was with that lady and had to tell the lady because they didn't know how to tell her. So and then she sat with her the whole time. One of my residents, I get called, and she had a heart attack, and they said she has call listed as of her next of kin. So we went, you take care of people. And then basically what we discovered was we have an obligation, and plus we can do a lot of good, not just with the Latino community, but with the new immigrant community, because Latinos have been here a while now. One difference is that we don't have the power base, which that's a whole new subject, but we have the Nepalian communities, the Somalian community, and basically bottom line is they're immigrant people and they're at your mercy, and so you have an obligation, because they don't know that in this country, we have people that they would come in and say, I just want I'm the leaseholder, and I just want my wife to be like, no. You're your wife, she's the leaseholder too, buddy. You know what I mean? Like, she has the same rights. And I've seen that a lot. And so those kind of things. And why is it so important that we know how many people are in your house? Because if we have a fire, we need to know how many people are there. Plus, if something happens to you, and you disappear, who's going to know you're there? And, we've learned this. I've learned it through experiences, bad things happening. I had a gentleman, a young guy. This is where I became diehard about this. He was a Latino guy, young guy, nice guy, came in with his brother. So the brother, was renting the apartment and everything. We never see them. Best kind of residents, pay the rent, never bother nobody, don't destroy nothing. But one day, he came and he said his one brother was missing, and I said, "What brother?" I said, his brother? No, this other brother. He never told us about this guy, so I had no idea what this guy looked like. We find out later, the police was looking. They had they find this body years, like a couple years later, and it was his brother, and nobody way to know he was there. He was burned to death. I mean, it was horrible, and it was like, that's the moral of the story is somebody could have easily done it, and we would not be the wiser. So we could pretend and not care, or we could say, all right, this is why it's important for us to know who's there, not to judge you, but to be like your advocate, to give you rights, so that when somebody's looking for you or when you're not showing up, we know you're there. If you're a woman especially, if you think about it, if you are a woman, say that you're here and you don't speak the language and you're coming from another country with totally different culture, and your husband is abusive, if something happens to you, who's even going to know you're there? Who's going to know? So we make it our point, knowing, we know it's you. We know your wife is there. What happened to her? We haven't seen her. Where's she at? You know what I mean? Does that make us nosy? I guess in a way it does, but it makes it as a village.
Safe.
Yes. You could, I remember one time, many years ago, I get a phone call, and they said to me, hey, somebody's breaking into this one lady's house. Well, we knew this lady was a single lady, and we knew that she worked during the day. So somebody was coming in through, a person was coming through the back door. So we knew that wasn't her. So I couldn't reach my maintenance guy. And this is before cell phones, okay? So I run out there. Well, the cell phones had just come out, the little flip ones. So I run out there, so I see the person and I yell, hey, what are you doing? Well, it was her dad. Okay, but she didn't know, I didn't know that. So he kind of like looked at me like, what are you doing? And I'm like, what are you doing in that back door? So he started laughing, and I said, I'm going to call the police and whatever. So then she ran out and she said, Miss Anna, it's okay, it's my dad, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I was so embarrassed. But her dad said, well, it's good. You're looking out. And I said, yeah. And then he said, I just got a question. What were you going to do with that little phone? I was like, what are you going to do? I said, all right. I hadn't figured it out, but I was going to do something. But bottom line is, she's a young girl. We don't know. He could have been anybody, so. Yeah.
So, Ana Maria, you mentioned your daughter. You raised your daughter. You had one daughter. Tell me about, and you mentioned that unfortunately you weren't able to teach her Spanish.
Yeah.
But there's other ways that you.
I taught her about our culture.
Right, the culture. So tell me about how she grew up, sort of knowing who she was as Latina.
It's funny. Yeah. Okay. She knew my mother. So thankfully she did know my mother. And so she knew how strong my mother was. And when I got divorced, it was kind of a moment where my whole world I had been married 18 years, and in one moment my whole life kind of living in a town where you had no family. And my mom, when I called her, she was very sympathetic. So she was like, why are you crying? You were an educated woman. You'll be just fine. Close the book. Move on. Take care of your daughter. What are you teaching your daughter? And my daughter was there when I was talking to my mom. And I wanted a mom that would say, pobrecita mija.
Right.
My mom didn't do that. She's like, okay, lloras. So it was like, oh, whoa. So my daughter saw, that the good and the bad of it. Because I say bad because then my daughter, one of the bad things about being a strong Latin woman is that we're strong Latin women, and we forget that we need to be vulnerable women, that our daughters need to see that we do fall apart, because I didn't see that with my mother. She was a strong woman. And I think now, wow, my mom was a woman that left her everybody and married my dad and never looked back. It had been hard, right? Never saw it. Anything that happened, I was like strong. So my daughter always knew strong Latin women. And from little, we've always, her middle name is my mother's name, Beatriz. So Kelly Beatriz, I know, right? But she was always told that. And so she's always kind of like, even though she grew up in a place where she is the only one, she was always wanted her to be proud of who she was. First of all, because I don't look like her. And she, people would see us and in our town, of course, everybody knows us, but where we go outside of our town, they wouldn't think I'm the mother. And especially if you see my grandson, he has blue eyes, he's blonde hair. He doesn't look like me, but he knows. I call him papas. So she was like that. I always knew, try to teach her culture. She understood it, and she would have it with my brothers. And when we went home to Texas, she was very proud of it. I remember when she turned 15, my brother was her Nino, and they got her the Barbie, quinceañera Barbie. And
does she have a quinceañera?
In our town, like I said, no, because we live in a place where what we did is we did like a party type thing. So like I said, I regret that I didn't teach her Spanish, but I didn't really realize how much of it was in until I see her now being such an advocate for Latinos, and I'm saying, why would she be? Because it's still in her blood, and because she understands that this is what we go through and what my dad went through, and even though, and then she gave me experiences. I remember one experience. One day she called me from school, and this is before they don't allow cell phones or nothing. She grew up in those years, and she called me from school, and she was very scared. Now my daughter is a very good student and a cheerleader and all that. So she said, "Mom, there's a bunch of kids out here, and they're wearing the rebel flag." And she grew up in Charlotte for 5 years of her life, and in Charlotte, Carolina, so she knew what the rebel flag to people of color meant. So she understood very well that's a bad flag. So she was very scared, and she was like, "Mom, I just feel uncomfortable and whatever." So I called the principal, who was a friend, one little town's your friend, and I said to him, I hear that the kids are wearing the rebel flag. Well, what had happened was some young man had died, and the kids trying to, in honor of him, were wearing this shirt, right? So it had nothing to do with anything other than that this kid had passed away, and he had got killed in a car wreck, and so the kids were wearing this in his honor, but she sees that, and she saw it in a different way. So I talked to the principal, and he says, he said to me, I remember really well, because he said, "Don't worry." He said, first of all, he says, "Why get all upset about it?" And I lost it. And I said, "Listen here, buddy." I said, "Don't you tell me, a person of color, in an all-white area, not to worry. If you're telling me you got it under control, Tim, I got you. Good. But don't you ever tell me or my child how to feel. Oh, no, that's not how I meant it. I'm very sorry." So... But that was his incident where she wasn't seeing herself like everybody else.
Right.
She saw herself separate. That Heritage Month, she would make sure they knew about it, So it was kind of the thing where, and for her graduation, she wanted flautas. That's what we had. So we made, we had flautas. She wanted flautas. She wanted... to this day, she makes really good ones, actually better than mine. But so yes, her understood her culture in regards to that. Growing up, it was hard for her to go from a little school to big OSU, but she got the moral scholarship. Yes, she got the presidential scholarship. So I was very proud, because I did not realize how big that was until now. I realize when people say how hard it is to get that, and she got that, and that's my baby, And then LMA, she did the second one. So yeah, but it was hard for her. I think because any person that's a different culture that looks different, and put them in a place where there's a part of you that have to worry that they're going to lose their identity, because if you as a parent don't put it in there, they do. I think that even in my lousiness of teaching her, because I've always been honest with her, and I told her what I did wrong was I didn't realize that I should be a proud Mexican American until I was already an adult, because I was raised just to be American. And what I needed her to understand was there is nothing wrong with loving your country, but loving your culture too.
Right.
It doesn't, there's no reason to separate it. And I didn't know that. And I learned my culture from my friends. And then I'm like, I want to learn about the Mexican culture. I want to know our people, we went through. And then I went back and looked at my history and saw, hey, wait a minute. My grandfather was part of the railroad in Kansas. And the Mexican Americans were kicked out of of Kansas from the president because they were assumed to be immigrants, and they weren't because, discrimination.
Right.
So we had our own story to tell. So we just didn't know it. You know what I mean? And so I think my friends, the damas, they taught me, and I try to teach it to Kelly, and my little grandbaby, we put her in her little outfit and,
So she might have a quinceañera.
Yeah, she will. She will. Yes, yes. Because we did one thing, so you'll be a little bit, I'm shamed in speaking to you, but so when she turned 3, we did do her ceremony at our church, and the priest was really cool. He said, just tell me what I'm supposed to say. So I found it in Spanish, and my friend Adriana translated it. So he did the presentation at the church. We did it with her at 3, which is the Mexican tradition.
Right.
So we did do that in the church allowed at St. John Domen, and and with she put flowers for my mother, and and yes, we did. So
great,
yes.
Great. Ana Maria, what has been one of the most difficult times of living here in Ohio?
This is difficult right now, I gotta say. This is the most difficult. I thought, okay, my stepson died 5 years ago, and that was very, very difficult, my father's passing. But I gotta tell you, because there's difficult and then there's difficult. When I got divorced many years ago, God, I'm like 18 because I've been married a long time this time too, but it was difficult because my whole world turned upside down, and it was a difficult moment, but I knew everything was going to be okay. When my father passed and my mother passed, it was difficult because I loved them, right? When Brian passed, it was very difficult. I was really worried for his dad, but those are things that life throws at you. But the pandemic hasn't been the most difficult for me. It has really taken everything that I strongly believe in and put it out there, because I'm a person that never miss mass, okay? And I mean physically going to mass. And I'm someone who hugs friends and sees my friends a lot and sees, and we go, my husband and I go to a lot of places and take our children and my stepchildren. I mean, we don't consider them steps, so we say children. My grandchildren in Cincinnati. So the pandemic has been the most difficult for me, depression-wise, heart-wise, to see, because it's so unknown, because it's so, took everything we know and just kind of flipped it on its head. You know what I mean? Like, my corporate office is on New York City. So my boss, my coworkers in New York, they lost people to the COVID. They experienced it. And I think that's the reason why we've been very fortunate, because my boss from the beginning took it real serious and made us do things here prior to even becoming the law. So we'd already started doing things prior to all that. So it wasn't really difficult for us. However, to see how it has affected everything, it's been very difficult. You would think discrimination, death, and all that, but this COVID has really, 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 and there is a sense of discrimination, because you see how immigrant people, are not given the same information. It is very different,
What have you seen, or how has the immigrant community been left out?
Well, I mean, when I say left out, I mean more like, for example, I mean, I know that the governor is doing what he can, and I know us together, and my friend Lupe Velasquez, who their people, they do a lot. But I, as property managers, know that we have been educating a lot of people about the COVID, and it's at this point they should know. And so to me, you could say, well, they should know, or you could say, wait a minute, that population is not being informed as much. So I've seen that you don't see things. For example, whenever the things would come out, I would say, well, do you have it in Spanish? Do you have it in the police? Do you have? And they might have Spanish, they might, but they would not have it in other. And how are those people going to know about it? And, and keep in mind that, as an American, as somebody who has all my family here, my families are in the States. However, many of my residents have people somewhere else.
Right.
And I have one employee, one of my very good employees. He's from Nepal. And he was gone for a month. So his story is kind of sad. He actually, his father got very sick. And so much so that he felt the need to go to his country and it was supposed to be for 2 weeks. Okay, so Koi spoke and he wanted to take 3 weeks because it was his dad and he's not going to go to Nepal every other day. You know what I mean? It was not something he's going to be doing a lot. So he took his whole family. He was gone for so long because he wasn't allowed to come back.
Right.
And even when he came back, we still had to have him in quarantine for 2 weeks. So while we understand all that, but just the amount, other places were being allowed to come in, but anywhere where brown people were, they were not as sympathetic. I have residents. I had a resident who, a week after they moved in, they had a tragedy, and the wife had come in. She had her husband had brought her, and then he got killed like a week, and so she's here she doesn't know the language. She's from Africa. From a part of Africa, and she didn't have any family, and she couldn't, if she left, then she wouldn't be allowed to come back. So, you know what I mean? So it was this horrible tragedy, and it happened to many people, I think. So yes, I think that there was I think when this all happened, it came as from nowhere that nobody really thought it all out.
Right.
And they're just playing the way we do, where the rules are coming up as they come up. And we're learning to do things as, and that doesn't work very well, as we all know. So imagine it working with people, human beings. And so I think, and keep in mind too, what the things that we see. Well, domestic violence, skyrocket, child abuse, vandalism, all that. Why? Because kids aren't doing anything. Kids are just, are forced to be home. They don't have any sports. They took away the sports, which I see the thing. I understand all of what had to happen. I'm just saying it has taken an impact on people, and you see people sadder. Okay, I've had more conversations with people, and even with my own friends, they very fearful of getting sick. And what's weird is we don't even know how we know we're sick. You know what I mean? It's such a even myself. My in-laws, older people, and I was so fearful of my husband, that's his parents, and my husband works inside apartments, and for him to go to them and visit, go and cut their grass and do this and that, I was like, putting sprays on him because I was so afraid, God forbid they should get the virus because of us, you know what I mean? So all the way I see just different people being treated, and not even necessarily bad. It's just I see that the information isn't as quick out there, and people don't know. I know there's a lot of people that are trying to help, and I think I commend them. And I know for a fact because they work with us in different things. But I also think there's kind of like a gap, and I don't know if and in the Latino community, very much so. I think there's still so many people that don't think it's real, and I think that a lot of people are still. And they were impacted, in Columbus, as you're well aware. A lot of the Latino population does work in the food industry.
Essential jobs, yeah.
Yep, and that took the biggest hit. So, from the people that are the chefs, because you go to Eddie Merlot's, who do you think's cooking your food? Okay, all those restaurants to the people in the smaller from even the farm workers and all that, how it impacted and everything, and the factories, chicken factories, this factory, all that how it is impacted, and then those people's families and those people don't have, and they can't work from home. You think about the population of, you and I were very fortunate. We complain and say, man, I hate this, but do we? I mean, we're still not impacted, really. We can still do our job, we still get paid, but what about the people that there is no going to working from home? And if they don't have a daycare or whatever, right now, why is one of my employees' kids here? Why are my other employees because they don't have childcare.
Right.
So we had, as a company, had to say, we got to allow for that because that's our new normal. And do we really believe that after all of this is over, everybody's going to take down all the plastic? No, we're going to be waiting for the next virus. So our whole world has changed forever, and we're just kind of adapting. And people that are different, it's harder because they really don't have, like, that's why we got to, like, you know how many people come in and they don't even have masks? Now, we're in August, pandemic, March, and still don't, so maybe you can't afford one, for real. Like, I'm not going to argue, so isn't it easier just to give one? So for us, we do. We had to put all these rules into place, and it has hurt us from the sense that our one-on-one has taken a hit, and that concerns me. Because people used to think that this was a cafe. You know, like Mariana would sit there and I would listen to people just telling the drama. But now they can't do that. I have to protect my employees. Right. So they can come and say, hey, you know, my husband's yelling, you know what I mean? Or, oh, you know, this guy's driving me nuts. Or my kids are, we don't have that. I mean, think of how many reach out, how many services do you see for mental health right now for the Latino community? How many? You know, and other immigrant communities, same thing. It's like, this is really affecting people, and it's going to affect it even more, and we don't really know what to do. So yeah.
Ana Maria, you mentioned earlier that this has been difficult for you too. Like how you interact with the community, with your own family.
Yeah.
So what kind of things have you managed to do to cope with that? How do you manage what activities? How do you try to keep connected?
Well, stay connected is I'm a blabbermouth, so for me, talking is kind of a thing. Depending on if you mean in regards to my community, we still do our newsletter. We still have it. We still will be there if you need us to be there for you. So in regards to that, we are still continuous. We still have Warm. Warm is a program in Westerville that feeds kids from, you know, from 0 to 18, I think, and they come and anybody who needs a lunch that falls into that, they feed, and we have allowed them to come and still and do all that. So in that respect, still keeping pushing things like Proyecto Mariposa, pushing things like Big Brothers Big, whatever we can to help people in regards to that. In regards to personally, I have to have the network of my friends and my faith. One of the things for me that I never thought would be my reality, because I'm the most untechnical person, is the viral thing. Okay, for me it was like, I don't think so. So, but we still have, you know, we do our Zoom things and whatever. But I was doing the rosary every day with St. Paul, which is not even my church, but because I saw this group every single day, you know, until the church is open. So I still do adoration. I still do that. I have to have that's my focus. But mainly, I still have my core of friends. We have a WhatsApp, and we just continue to be there. For example, my birthday, my big 60 fell during the COVID, and my friends showed up here with their masks, play music, and it was different, but we adjusted. You know what I mean? And I think just being able to connect with people in that way, in regards to, same with the employees, kind of paying attention, seeing when there's something happening or when they're feeling a little bit down, and you just got to kind of, and I thought, one thing I thought was pretty cool, like where I live in my little town, when the COVID first quarantined everybody, and everybody was kind of thrown, right? The ladies, because it's always the ladies, they started this thing called wine fairies, okay? And so what the wine fairy is basically you make this like a basket, like a little care basket. Doesn't even have to be fancy. Like they put a bottle of wine, if you're not a drinker, they'll put something out. And they'll put like little things, and they put it in front of your yard, put it in your house, at your house, just to make you think someone's thinking of you. So me, I'm not as involved with my town since my daughter's grown up now. She's 29. I'm a workaholic here. But I got wine 3 times, meaning from the neighbors, and I thought that was pretty cool. And I did that, you know, so I did it for random people or whatever. But it was pretty, you know, little things like that. Just basically trying to stay I know my friends now. They're a little better than me. They on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday they do Zumba and the Rosary. I know, right? Combination, but they do, and they do it. And every at 6:30, I get my little phone call. I might do the Rosary, but I'm not gonna be doing this. So, but I try. I watch you guys hiking, and I think, oh, good for you. But yeah, but also I kind of try to still. What I really try to do is stay active with the things that you can still do, because you can still participate in different ways. You gotta get creative, but like, Dress for Success just had their viral thing, and we did a little party. It was only 3 of us because but we still did one. We still watched it on, and you could still make baskets. You could still donate. You could still give your time. So you could still, because if you do that, you kind of forget that the world is kind of falling apart, because it hasn't just been the COVID, with Columbus, the social injustices that happen and all the protests, they kind of take their toll too.
Right.
As a person who has now people of color, I had to not just pay attention to my own people, but think of my other employees and think about, okay, how do we address this? Do we ignore it, or do we just put it in front and say, okay, how do y'all feel about this?
Right.
And we did. We talked about it. I called when one of them got pulled over and said, this isn't okay. And they saw that I'm going to back you up. I'm going to stand, with you. I'm going to be there no matter what. And that's kind of how we do it. We're just trying to go through this together. It's very scary, but what really scares me, not so much this, is the school's part of it.
Right.
Because we don't know what's in front.
Ana Maria, what's the proudest moment of your life so far?
Oh my goodness. My daughter being my daughter, I would have to say, just when it's kind of hard because it's not really as a moment. It's like when I see what kind of mother she is, it's my proud moment. You know what I mean? Because when I see how, I was really proud when I saw her making a comment about the injustices in a very, very articulate way, without offending, without just stating her point. And I was very proud that she felt, and it didn't even affect, what she was talking about wasn't about her, but she was making a point about it. And I just thought, I've done something right. You know what I mean? Because she's a good person, and she's trying to do good. And that's my proudest is just to see that we done something. Her dad and I did something right, because she's turning it. My grandchildren are happy kids. Yesterday I had my grandson, and we had to force him to leave our house. So, he is a happy little boy because his mom is doing a good job, and he's a little boy that this is going on that he doesn't even know it. And that's good. And that's kind of my proudest. And my proudest moment would have to be being able to create communities. Like my staff, I don't know if you met my people, they're really, really good. They do things for people that they just do the right thing, and it makes me really proud, because I know that that's what we try to instill from the owner down. And we just, like we do a big Thanksgiving where we all bring different food and everything, and we all have, we've seen one of our employees get gunned down. We've had horrible tragedies happen to our people, and yet we still kind of, and they'll say to me, "We got this, boss. Don't worry." They were telling me that this morning because I was having some bad things happen, and they were telling me, "We're good. We're gonna be okay." You see, so that's my problem. The rest of it is like, okay, it's nice to get this or that award, whatever, but really, the people that when you see when you take a resident and we're their next of kin. What does that say about who we are? Okay, when we are able to, kids know who we are because they grew up. He grew up in this office. Tabby's children grew up in her office. years of being there, and they know, you know what I mean? And when my grandbaby can be around any kind of people, even though she lives in a place where everybody's white, she can be anywhere, and she's good with everybody because she's been around it, around diversity, around everybody. That's where it's my proudest to me. As a Latina, what's my proudest? My friends. They are my heart. They keep me humble. They keep me humble, but they gave me my culture. Do you understand how difficult it would be? Because you're someone who, just knowing you have a strong culture. But imagine that you always thought that you were green, like your whole life. And then one day someone said, no, you're actually red. And green is fine. You can still wear green, but you're red. And there's so much good about red. And that's kind of what happened to me. I joined a club by accident, trying to make friends in Columbus. And so I reached out to at the time, the Damas Latinas was the big. So, and I met these ladies, and I became part of them. And one of them was from Chile, one of them was from Colombia, one of them was from Ecuador. All of them were from different countries. Adriana from Mexico. I was the only American-born person. And I felt out of place. And they welcomed me. And then I saw, through myself, I went to a Juanes concert with them. I didn't even know who that was. I grew up with Bon Jovi, Journey, Wow. So I went to Juanes, and my friend Soledad, Colombian, big time, with the Colombian flag, and the amount of it was an awesome concert. He was really good. He's a good-looking man too. So it was a great concert, and the way they love their country and love this country, you know what I mean? It was taught me wow, you could know your roots, and you can be proud to be, to know why is the eagle on top of the cactus, what that signifies, and not just, viva la raza kind of thing, to know that it's a cool thing. And so like I said, they really made me proud of speaking Spanish, even if it's really bad, of being me, you know what I mean? The me. I live somewhere where I am not me. I am an Anglo version of me, okay? Because I'm an Anna, okay? That's what they call me, right? Anna. I'm, and I'm Ana Maria. They say, even the way they say my name, it sounds nice. You know what I mean? I don't have to sit there and say, no, not Anna Marie, So it is. My friends is what I'm proud of is, if I've accomplished anything, is that I have been surrounded myself from a core of friends that have been everything, and through craziness and my bad attitude and my anger problems, because I do get mad easy, and all that, they have centered me, when we would, with Festival Latino, and we would put flowers at the crew, gave flowers at the crew game, and always being proud. And anywhere we're at, we speak Spanish. And I make it a point, Elena, which for English is my first language, to speak Spanish, because when I'm around them, I'm so proud of being Hispanic. Does that make sense? It just, when you're with your core, it's just who you are, and you don't really even care. I mean, people could be throwing us daggers. We wouldn't even know, because we're so involved in what we're saying and what we're doing wherever. And I'm talking from being at a gala, from being at the movie theater, from being at Ocean Club, anywhere. Doesn't matter. We're together, and we're all talking at the same time, and you know what I mean, and celebrating this and that, and you
learned that,
and I learned,
in Ohio.
And I learned that in Ohio. It took me, oh my God, 25 years, almost 30 years to find my roots, because I found them when I found my friends. My father never pretended to be anything but what he was, right? And that's all good, because that taught me to be that way. But there's a difference between knowing who you are and knowing who you are. Because I've always known I was Latina, I always knew I was Mexican American, I always knew all that. But I never felt the proudness of it, the injustice of it, because then once you embrace it, you have to embrace the bad too. And and then you have to be responsible, right? So because then I realized that as a Latina woman in a place where I'm not one, anytime I meet someone, it may be the only opportunity that they have to meet a Latina woman. When my little neighbors are going on about the person in the White House and how great he is, the only person they know that doesn't look like them is me. That's it. So if I act this way, that's the representation. You know what I mean? It's a big responsibility. But at the same time, it's a good one because it's also hey, she's educated. She is proud of who she is. You know what I mean? So it could be both. So, and like I said, my friends, and some of them, so we're really blessed. We got really, it's kind of nice when you're surrounded by people that you are inspired by. You know what I mean? Because then you stay humble. Because for whatever you do, they're going to be up in you one because they're just who they are. Like, why wouldn't they? You know what I mean? Like, you think of Jahadia, when people say to me, oh, you do a lot of good. Nothing compared to her. You know what I mean? So for real, she's fixing the people of tomorrow. You know what I mean? So there's always, look at Dr. Ortiz. She's this woman who has taken the coroner's office and made it into something place for everybody. Who does that? So like I said, look at you. I mean, like, the university is proud to have you, right? Like, they should be like thanking you, right? So that's what I mean. So it's like we look at our friends and we're like, oh, this is cool, I don't know.
Ana Maria, is there anything else you would like to add about to this interview about your life or your?
I have been blessed. My experiences. I'm a Texas girl at heart. Always will be a Texan. Texas, me and Lily Vasquez, because we're from El Paso, right? I'm a Texas girl, but we've been very blessed. I've never had a bad boss, so I've been very lucky. I've been my whole life, even though I've had some ups and downs, there was always a reason, and so I take it as going with the journey. I've been blessed with my husband's a really good guy who is someone who really encourages diversion, even though he, obviously he's an Anglo guy, but he really embraces that I'm very proud of things and whatever, and what the things that matter to me matter to him. So I'm very fortunate. I think, there's been some horrible things that have happened to me as a child and whatever that I don't really, but the big one is this. I really believe that everything that has happened to me is the purpose for me to do something about, like, if I fall off a horse, then I know what it feels like to fall off a horse. Mm-hmm. So when someone who's in front of me got really battered by the horse, I can relate to them because it's happened to me. I've been discriminated against. I have been abused. I have been molested. So I've had the things that have happened to people happen to me, but I've also seen people with a lot worse do okay. Mm-hmm. This job keeps you. What I love most about my job, and what, if anything else, what is me, is that this job makes me believe in God. Mm-hmm. Because in the worst situations that I've seen people, they have endured. And like, I think of my life and I think how, poor me, we weren't rich, right? I went to the movies, to the drive-ins, because they didn't take us all to the movies, they would go to the drive-in. Mm-hmm. And then you hear about somebody who came here in a truck filled with water up to here, holding their baby up high, just to get to this country. Like, wow, or somebody who, I had a lady her daughter passed away. So it's this crazy story. So the lady comes in, I was in my office, and my leasing person ran up there and said, Miss Hannah, you gotta talk to this lady. I said something to her and I made her cry. And I'm like, oh my God, what did you do? She said, I told her her boots were nice, and she started to cry. So I said, what? So I run down, talk to her. So what's going on? I said, how you doing? She said, she's saying fine. She's like, and she did have some nice boots. So I said, so what's going on? And she said, we're talking, and then she said her daughter passed away. Now I just seen her daughter like 2 weeks ago. So I said, your daughter, what happened? So she said, oh, she had an asthma attack, and they put her under, and she was allergic to the anesthesia, so she died. She was 16. Okay, so I'm like, oh my God. So we're like telling her, oh, we're sorry, and her daughter had got her those boots. She had got these boots with her daughter painted on them. So when she told her the boots were nice. So I'm sitting there feeling bad for her, right? Thinking I know everything. I'm going to make her feel better because I'm so much better. So I said to her, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry for your loss and whatever. And she says, no, I'm blessed. And I said, what? She says, I'm blessed. And I said, what do you mean? Because, this horrible tragedy has happened to her. And she says, just think about it, Miss Anna. Just think about this. Of all the people in the world, God chose me to be her mother. Me to be the one who brought her in and saw her come into the world and be there when she left the world. How many people have that fortune? I am blessed. And I'm like, oh my God, your faith is like, I'm so like humbled by your faith. Because I tell you, if this is my daughter, I'd be like really mad at God. I said, so I'm really blown away. And she said, no, just think about it. It's a fact. And so full circle, when my stepson died, that conversation came to my head, and I said to him, of all the people in the world, you got to be his dad. And everybody who knows him knows who we love more than anybody was you. So that lady taught me. And so this job teaches me every day. Sometimes good things and sometimes bad things, but every day.